Jake Thorpe has cycled over 20,000 miles all over the world in some pretty remote locations. Here's his 11 most loved products.
So first up, we've got the Lezyme Mini Track Pump. Now, this has been talked about untold times on this channel as well. I know that Chris Hall mentioned it as one of his ultimate long distance bike ride tools. So it is just seriously good. You need a good track pump. If you don't want to spend hours sweating profusely by the side of the road, just like, casting expletives out into the night air, you're going to want something that's going to blow up your tires pretty quickly. And this one, I've seated tubeless tires. It doesn't get you unbelievably sweaty as you're trying to do it. And one hack I do have, unless you've got the dexterity of a concert pianist, is to flip the tube off the top before you try and unscrew it, because this is fiddly. This is what I mean. This is what I've spent most of my time doing. Just twisty, twisty, twist. This thing pops down, means you can stand on it, and then instead of having to tense up like a bodybuilder, you can just stand on it and pump from the top. It's very modular and you can take it apart on the move. I've often had times where I've stored it on the outside of my bike, it gets really dusty, dust gets in, means that the thing's got a load of friction when you're pressing down on it. So essentially you can just unscrew this, you can take the whole plunger out, it's got O-ring that you can replace, you can clean it if you need. Yeah, it works really well, and you can replace parts as well. I think they're pretty widely available on Lezyme's website. Next up is, rather obviously, the frame. So the frame I've gone for is a Mason Exposure. It's their steel bike. It's a fast, far gravel bike. What I love about the Mason is that it's obviously steel, so it's super durable. It means that I'm not worrying about it every time I've got to pack it away when it's going in a bike box or putting it on the back of a lorry if I'm getting a bit knackered. So I don't worry about the integrity of it. It's super durable. It's got, I'm trying not to say as many mounts as the Himalaya, but essentially mounts everywhere. It's got, my favorite ones are the seat stay mounts. So essentially it's got mounts on either seat stay. You can store bottles there, or I usually store the Lezyme Mini Track Pump there. It's also got incredibly wide clearance. This thing is chunky. At the moment, I run a 2.4 inch mountain bike tire on the front in 650B. I think it takes up to 2.35 inch in 650B, and then 50 mil, I think, in 700C. But essentially enough clearance for anything that you throw at it. And yeah, it's awesome. So next up, we've got a bit of a controversial one, the oval chainring. Now, some people think it's just a gimmick. For me, it feels crazy when you first put it on. After you're used to a round one, you can feel the difference. It basically, it's supposed to smooth out the pedaling efficiency. And if you want to smooth out the pedaling efficiency at any time, it's over a long bike tour. It also makes climbing a little bit easier. I always feel like I can pedal one harder gear in the oval chainring than I can in a round chainring. And it also helps with grip because you're not putting down, you're putting down fairly consistent power, which is converted to consistent torque. So essentially, it's not just skidding out when you stamp on the pedals horizontally. So that can be really helpful on the rough stuff, climbing uphill, especially when you've got a bit more weight on your bike. Having the oval chainring just to help just ground that back end and just make sure that you're not slipping around all over the place. That's really helpful. So I use the Garmin chainring. I'm not sure whether that's pronounced right, but Garmin is the one that I've gone for. They do direct mount chainrings. I actually use the 5-bolt Spider, and I use it I ride a 38 tooth chainring. So for me, that basically gives the feeling of a 36 tooth chainring on a climb, and so that's really helpful in just kind of bringing that gear down without actually bringing the gear down. So for the next one, we've got the tent. Now the tent, it doesn't look like a tent at the moment, but the beauty of what I'm going to talk about in a second, the MSR Hubba Hubba, is that it fits just perfectly inside a Tailfin aero pack. So it packs down super light and super small, but with a lot of space, which is why I love it. It is a bit of the Rolls Royce of tents when it comes to bike packing, but it's just worth the money for me. If you haven't got a good tent, you're never going to get a good night's sleep, and that way you're always going to opt to shift over to a hotel, and you're going to rack up the price, through hotel rooms so quickly. So it's really worth getting a good tent and actually sleeping in it. In here, I've got some other bits of the sleeping kit. This is a good bit to go with it. It's a footprint, so a tent footprint, which you peg out and then you put your tent on top of. Now, this was the hack I learned from a mate of mine who went bike touring in East Africa, who woke up one night completely covered in ants. He was crawling in ants because he didn't have a ground sheet down and they'd eaten through the bottom of the tent. So as soon as I heard that, I was straight out to buy a ground sheet, and that was great. Also helps if it's rockier ground, so you're not puncturing the tent, and it also helps if there's a bit of bad weather because it's another waterproof layer. Inside, got the pegs. I actually keep the poles usually on the outside because they don't quite fit in the tail fin. But this is the tent. It's the MSR, like I say, the Hubba Hubba NX. And it's a 2-person tent because I'm 6'5". It's a 1-person tent. But the good thing about it is that it pegs out so that you've got a lot of volume within it. It's not a sort of triangular tent. It pegs out so that the crossbar holds it in more of a sort of cube shape. So you've got the ground sheet out here, but then you've got the main tent and the fly sheet in here. And that brings me quite nicely on to the next bit, which is a great sleeping system. Now, this is also another area that is really worth not skimping on. So I went for, again, the sort of gold standard of sleeping mats, which is Thermarest. I went for the Neo Air X Therm. And I, again, being taller, have gone for the full length mat and the full width square mat rather than the one that makes you sleep like a mummy. This, I actually tend to pack down inside my tent, so it's always in there when I'm setting up. As you can see, it's seen quite a lot of use so far, so yours will look fresher than this. I use this along with a inflatable pillow. Now this is the, again, seen some use, but this is the Sea to Summit Aeros down pillow. Again, large, because it's worth not cutting the corners on the sleeping stuff. A good night's sleep is always going to be worth it. And yeah, if you buy cheaper chip stuff, then you will inevitably be spending the night in a hostel. So go for the good stuff. So next up, we've got a full frame bag. Now, for me, I went with an Alpkit custom frame bag. It's called the Stingray. This means that they leave you to do the hard work, but for a better fit. So you've got to measure it up yourself. Some top tips on that front. Number one, make it the narrowest width possible because there is nothing worse than a full frame bag rubbing on your knees. It is going to drive you insane. I can't remember exactly. It's maybe 6 millimeters or something. No, 6 centimeters. Definitely not 6 meters, but go for the narrowest one on offer. Number two, put a zip midway down. Now this will also just cinch it all in and make sure that you've got frame bag that's not bulging out. I know that, for example, the tail fin one's got carbon plates to stop that happening. Now this one, it doesn't. I imagine it's a bit cheaper than the tail fin one. So you've got to do something else to keep it in. So yeah, putting a midway zip will be a really good way to do that. If you need more frame bag space, like I did, I took an iPad with me, so I needed that sort of volume space. Then they also offer a document sleeve on the outside. So I would definitely go for that. So that's the second tip. Third tip is keep it way further away from the cranks and the bottom bracket than you think. Now, my mate's done this where he's done it right down to the bottom bracket and it just always gets gunky and caught in the, rubs against the cranks. I thought I was keeping it far enough away. I didn't. So basically I've done a third of these tips. So if you can do 3 out of 3, then you'll have a much better time with it. But the full frame bag is just a really efficient way to use that dead space. What I've also done on this frame bag is because it's fully custom, you can mark out where you want straps and where you want bolt holes if you want to bolt it on. So I've actually got it bolted on to the mounts at the bottom. Like I said, the Mason exposure has got loads of mounts along the seat tube and the down tube. So I've bolted it to those, and it means that if I do want bottle cages inside, then I can bolt them inside the frame bag. So if I just want to use the lower level for bottles still, then I can do that, and then I can just give it a quick unzip and pull them out when I want them. So that's a nice hack, especially good in super dusty conditions. That could be just the way to go, because then your bottles aren't getting all gunky, muddy or dusty. You've got them protected by the frame bag. The other thing that the frame bag does is it's really great for weight distribution. So you can put the weight in the middle of the bike, and that's just key to make sure that you don't get any shimmy and that your bike handles as similarly to unloaded as you can get it. So the next one we've got on the list is cargo bibs. Now, these have got a die-hard following among those who know. As soon as you try them, you're never going to go back. In this day and age, when we've all got our phones, it's just the easiest place to put them. You don't have to faff around with zips. Cargo bibs are especially useful in the bikepacking, bike touring scene because I never wear jerseys. Jerseys are just completely, I feel useless when you're bike touring. They feel too close, they get completely dirty after one wash, and you can't wear them off the bike as you can a sort of t-shirt, civilian shirt. So with cargo bibs, you've essentially got the storage of a jersey, but on your legs instead. Go for them, they're great. Next on the list is a helmet light. Now, I'm a recent convert to these. I didn't use one before, but I've become an absolute fan of them. Essentially, I use one, the Exposure Axis, got a great battery life. I think this is the Joystick Mark 10, and it's really great because you can put it obviously on your helmet, but also it goes on your bike if you want to just use it in sort of a standard light setup. Helmet light is particularly good because it gives you the directional beam, so you can just see exactly where you want to look. You can light it up. It's good for me because if I'm riding in the dark, I've got to be honest, I'm a bit scared of the dark, so I'm like often looking around thinking, what was that noise? And you can see exactly what it was. It's good for seeing things like potential camp spots when you're cruising in after dark. The other thing is, it's absolutely essential when you get off the bike and it stops you faffing around in the dark when your bike light is just facing forward. It means that you can just check out anything that you want on your bike. You can get kit out, you can do repairs, mechanicals, all these sorts of things. You can deal with those. It stops you faffing around getting a head torch out. You've just got it already there. So really good for bike touring in general. So next on our list, we've got a radar rear light. Now, I only came into the market for one of these later on. Basically, during my trip, I was riding through South Africa. Roads were super dangerous there. Kept on having really close calls with cars, and I was in a bike shop having some small repairs done, and the bike mechanic there, Lawrence Fox, good looking out, said, hey man, take one of these on the house, you can't put a price on safety. And it changed the game for me. So essentially what it is, you put it on the back of your bike, it's a rear light, but it also has a radar that picks up traffic as it's approaching. So instead of having to crank your neck around to look what's behind you, it will show you the vehicle as it's approaching, and it means that you can just move slightly to the left or to the right to get out of the way of it as it's coming by. Like I say, it was a real game changer for me, and I think as well for people who are new to bikepacking, it will be really important because with more weight on the bike, essentially the bike might move slightly unpredictably. It's a different, it handles very differently. So when you've got traffic coming by you really quickly, it can be really helpful to have a bit of pre-warning so you're not having to balance, the bike and looking around at the same time. So radar rear light, game changer. Get one of these. Okay, so I would be remiss not to shout out the one product that I got given for this trip. The rest of them were actually, all self-funded, but Valon hooked me up with some sunglasses for this trip, and they were particularly good. They're pretty unconventional as sunglasses go, and especially ones that you'd see on the bike. Roadies would absolutely rip you for them, but when I was riding through the desert, they were so good because obviously you've got sand blowing through. It just basically meant that I was wrapped up. I didn't kind of constantly get sand in my eyes, and it also made me look a bit like Boris the Animal. So I had these ones. And I also wore a pair of Oakleys when I wasn't riding with these through the desert. They've since brought out a cycling specific pair, the Watchtowers. So these are the Herons, which are actually like mountaineering glasses that stop the glare while you're up on the mountains, stop snow as well, but they just kind of came in handy in the sandstorms. But now they've got these, which are the Watchtowers, which are their cycling specific glasses. So I've been rolling with these ever since, and yeah, absolutely love them, can't fault them. And then the last one on the list is instant warmth, packable down gloves. So I've got these ones from Montaigne that pack down, incredibly small. They're the Montaigne Prisms. They actually, I think, have just stopped making them. So I bought a second pair because these are on their last legs. But they're so good that you can see, I've like sewed them back together. They've obviously seen a lot of action. Essentially, they are just a sort of like insulated glove, and they pack down super small, and you bang them on and you're just like instantly warm. So for me, the worst thing is always having cold hands. I always say like, if I were a secret agent, just, you need to get some information out of me, just give me cold hands and I'll tell you anything you need to know to get warm again. So if you're on a descent or, just in campsite at night, having something that will just immediately warm up those hands, super essential. So packable down gloves.